Okay, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a city that, well, it kind of defies easy definition, doesn't it? Sydney, Australia. You immediately picture the icons, the opera house, that dazzling harbor, the sunshine.
Yeah, absolutely. It's postcard perfect. But beneath that stunning surface, our sources really dig into a much more complex, often contradictory history and identity.
Right.
And this deep dive, it's built on this really quite unique collection of personal observations, historical reflections, and these incredibly vivid anecdotes. They all come from one writer's 30-day journey back home to Sydney.
Hmm.
And he filters everything through his interactions with this remarkable circle of friends he has there.
Hmm.
So our mission really is to uncover what truly defines Sydney. Not just the famous landmarks, but its actual DNA. We're looking at it through the lens of its elemental forces: earth, air, fire, water, and crucially, the human experiences all tangled up with them.
And, right from the moment this writer lands, you get the sense this isn't your typical travelogue. He arrives back in Sydney, flying in from New York, right? And he's just had this long flight, apparently stuck next to some very excitable martial arts team, all dressed up in stars and stripes.
Oh,
You'd think landing would be a relief, but the first thing he hears on Australian soil is just jarring. This bureaucratic voice calling out, "Customer O'Brien, Customer Figgins, please present yourselves at the podium."
Customer O'Brien, yeah.
It's such an immediate clash of expectations. It signals straight away this deep dive is going way beyond the surface stuff.
That initial customer greeting, it's actually quite telling, isn't it? It connects immediately to this deeper historical thread. The writer sort of clocks this very formal, almost police report style. And he links it back to a nation that started without, well, a bourgeoisie. So the first citizens, they learned their polite way of talking from police reports, like, at this stage, I apprehended the suspect.
He come quietly with me to the podium.
Where he assisted me with my inquiries. Exactly. And that kind of hints, doesn't it, at this whole convict stain idea. That lingering cultural impact from Australia's origins as a penal colony, which fostered this pervasive feeling that, being polite is to be servile. And maybe this deep-seated resentment of authority figures who cause suffering.
That's a really powerful idea. Does that mean there's still this, inherent distrust of institutions, maybe even success itself, in Sydney's culture today? Our writer's journey makes it pretty clear, pretty quickly, that to really get Sydney, you have to look underneath, to its first element, Earth. Our sources really hammer home that Sydney's actual DNA is sandstone.
Yeah, it's everywhere once you look.
You see it in those incredible yellow bluffs at the heads, the old convict buildings, even just the retaining walls along those steep harborside streets.
And this sandstone, it's not just, a backdrop. It shapes basically everything. It's soft, easy to work. So much so that a sandstone was apparently slang for a convict who broke easily under the lash.
Yeah.
It's also incredibly porous. The first settlers actually used that for water filtration. But the critical thing here is how this geology, this sandstone, dictated that early colonial struggle. The British tried farming it like they would back in Kent or Surrey, and it was a disaster. Total failure. The soil was thin, leached, the water just drained straight through. Starvation was a constant threat in those early years.
And that's such a stark contrast to the Aboriginal people's knowledge, right? 40,000 years of living there.
Exactly. Tim Flannery, who the sources mentioned, points out the landscape was actually carefully tended through indigenous practices, something the British just completely failed to see or understand.
And it's right here, isn't it? Beneath one of Sydney's most famous modern landmarks, that our sources reveal this, well, frankly, staggering ancient history, this idea of a first city.
Yeah, Bennelong Point, where the Opera House stands now. It was once the site of these huge shell middens, like 12 meters high. Ancient ones.
12 meters.
Not just random piles. They were evidence of a thriving Aboriginal first city, thousands of years old.
So what happened to it?
Well, the convicts basically cannibalized it. They burned the shells to make lime for mortar, essentially using the remains of that ancient indigenous culture to build the new colonial city.
That's quite something. A buried history literally underneath one of the most visible symbols of modern Sydney.
And that legacy, if you think about the wider implications, it really impacts the city's whole fabric. The sources describe Sydney's central business district, the CBD, as having this unloved, opportunistic aesthetic.
Unloved, yeah.
It's not just about boring buildings. It's presented as this living testament to a city built on, well, immediate gain rather than some grand long-term vision. It links directly back to the legacy of the Rum Corps.
Ah, yes, the Rum Corps.
Those powerful, often corrupt military officers who basically control the colony's trade, especially rum, for their own benefit. Figures like John MacArthur. So the CBD is framed as a kind of physical expression of 2 centuries of Sydney's own brand of capitalism, where, public good often seemed to come second to personal profit and, frankly, cronyism, a monument to an elite that didn't value much beyond self-enrichment.
That is a strong take. Does that suggest a basic lack of, say, urban planning or civic pride? Or is it more just a reflection of a really pragmatic, maybe even ruthless, local character?
Hmm.
So from the solid earth, let's move to the power and the peril of water. Anthony Trollope, the English writer, he visited in the 1870s.
Right.
And he observed Sydney's beauty, saying he'd seen nothing equal to it in the way of landlocked scenery.
And our sources explain what makes it so unique geologically are these 3 complicated invasions of water into Earth.
Yeah.
You've got the main event, the spectacular harbor itself, then Broken Bay up north and Botany Bay down south.
And Botany Bay gets special attention, doesn't it, as a kind of punished place?
Yeah, definitely. Cook initially promoted it, but then Governor Phillip arrived and pretty much immediately abandoned it, declared it impossible for settlement. So it became this historical dumping ground for everything everyone unwanted, the dead, the mad, criminals, indigenous people.
And now it's where the airport is.
Exactly. The irony. It's where Sydney's International Airport sits today. A place that welcomes you, but also, as the writer puts it, kind of lands with a hard, unpleasant bump.
And the sheer power of the water becomes terrifyingly real in one particular story. Jack Ledoux, one of the writer's friends, he tells the story about a near-death experience sailing his boat, Dorothy, which was apparently custom-built and famously unstable on the Hawkesbury River, which flows into Broken Bay. You have to picture this. Heavy rain, strong easterly gales, and outgoing tides all hitting at once, creating what Jack calls a place of ultimate evil.
It sounds absolutely terrifying. Makes you think twice about messing with those waterways. And the physicality of his struggle, that's what's so gripping in the account. Jack describes this hair-raising ride. He says he felt like a joker on the street corner with 5 musical instruments, just trying to balance, pump out water, steer, all while his boat is basically flying down the river and sinking.
He ends up getting tossed into the sea, can't swim, just clinging to the overturned boat.
And his rescue is just miraculous. This tiny little fellow in a motorboat pulls him out. Jack calls him the smallest of God's angels.
Wow.
It really underscores this profound, sometimes brutal respect you have to have for the water there. It's not just a pretty backdrop. It's a living, dangerous force.
So shifting elements again, what about the air? What does all this mean for the very air you breathe in Sydney?
Well, the sources note something really interesting, that the very perfume of the Sydney air is a consequence of sandstone. And its unique flora, those toxin-laden plants that thrive on it, it gives the bush that distinctive, almost antiseptic smell.
Right, that eucalyptus smell.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you've got the winds. The sources contrast the bullying, blustering westerly wind, which can literally rip roofs off houses.
Yeah, I've heard about those.
With the sweet, seductive nor'easter breeze that comes in off the sea.
So how do these natural elements, the air, the wind, connect with the human experience?
Well, this is where it gets quite personal for the writer. He shares this deeply felt struggle with recurring panic attacks, specifically when driving across the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
The bridge, really?
Yeah, for him, this iconic, seemingly mundane structure became his own personal Berlin Wall. It held this profound psychological weight.
That's fascinating. It shows how these big public structures can become intensely private, personal things.
Absolutely. And it highlights how a city's physical nature can really imprint itself onto individual lives.
Now, moving from the city's winds, there's another Sydney mystery, isn't there? This enigma of eternity.
Ah, yes. Eternity.
For decades, this single word just mysteriously appeared, chalked in perfect copperplate script, all over Sydney's footpaths. Nobody knew who was doing it.
It's an amazing story. Our sources reveal it was Arthur Stace. He was an alcoholic, an ex-soldier who became an evangelist. Apparently, he heard a sermon. The word eternity struck him. And he just found himself miraculously able to write it in this beautiful script.
Just like that.
Just like that. And later, the artist Martin Sharp became a sort of custodian of the word. He even arranged for it to be lit up on the Harbour Bridge for the Millennium celebrations.
But the appeal of eternity for Sydney-siders, it wasn't necessarily religious, was it?
Probably not for most. The sources suggest its resonance comes from something else. It taps into that underdog culture, that keen nose for injustice, maybe stemming from the city's convict past. Arthur Stace, he was an outcast, right? A cockatoo, which was slang for a lookout maybe for illegal gambling dens or brothels, a recovering alcoholic. But he was his own man, a slave to no one on this earth.
Ah, okay.
And that's why Sydney embraced him and his word. He embodied that rebellious, individualistic spirit that really clicks with the city's identity.
From the air and its mysteries, we turn to fire. Another powerful element, both natural and human-influenced. Our sources mention this quite heated debate around Aboriginal fire stick farming.
Yes, it's a big one. Tim Flannery, for example, argued that the landscape before Europeans arrived was actually carefully tended by indigenous burning practices over millennia. His argument basically is that European interference stopping these practices is what led to the kind of catastrophic, death-dealing bushfires we see now.
And that became terrifyingly real for Sydney itself, didn't it, in January 1994?
Oh, absolutely. Massive bushfires literally engulfed the city. The whole place was ringed with fire. Ash was falling in the CBD. It was described as a ghastly apocalypse. Destroyed hundreds of homes, including places where both the writer and his friend Jack Ledoux used to live.
The descriptions are harrowing, but what's really striking is the individual response to that kind of devastation. Marty Singh, another friend of the writer, gives this incredible minute-by-minute account of defending his home in the Blue Mountains during those fires.
It's an amazing story. He sounds so calm, nailing corrugated iron over skylights, making little dams in the gutters with his wife's expensive Kenzo dresses.
Kenzo dresses.
Yeah, flooding the roof, just doing whatever it took.
And it wasn't just him, right? There was a community effort.
Definitely. Volunteers just showed up, apparently wrapping tea towels around their faces because they didn't have proper masks. And Marty talks about this powerful, almost serene moment where he realized he could die, but somehow felt it was all right.
Wow. That's incredible resilience.
It really is a testament to that human spirit against these overwhelming natural forces.
But the Blue Mountains, those elements, they aren't always survivable, are they? There's another story about Sheridan.
Right. Sheridan's story involves abseiling in Dania Canyon. It's another reminder of the unpredictable and sometimes deadly beauty of that region and the potentially fatal consequences of, perhaps, a bit of reckless bravado in his drive afterwards. It connects back to that theme of danger lurking beneath the beauty.
Okay, so let's pivot now to the human landscape itself. This seems like maybe the most complex layer of Sydney's identity. We mentioned Customer O'Brien at the start, and our sources keep circling back to that cultural legacy of the convict era, that observation by an English visitor that being polite is to be servile.
Yeah.
Does that deep-seated distrust of authority still shape interactions today? Does it fuel a kind of unique Sydney irreverence?
I think it absolutely does. That attitude feels deeply ingrained, and it arguably impacts how the city conducts its business. The Sydney way of doing business is often described in the sources with reference to, pervasive corruption, or at least cutting corners.
How so?
There are anecdotes about casual fixing by characters nicknamed Fix. There's the story of Geordie Levinson's stolen motorcycles, which mysteriously get returned because there's suddenly a glut on the market. Wink, wink.
Yeah.
And then there's that truly shocking Olympic torch scandal involving the daughter of IOC Vice President Kevin Gasper getting a spot in the relay ahead of an actual Olympian. It's stated pretty bluntly in the source that corruption paid off, suggesting this casual acceptance of a system where personal networks often trump the official rules.
So if that's part of the culture, what happens with something like Anzac Day, a really quintessential Australian commemoration?
Well, our sources show it as quite nuanced, often contradictory. You have the official narrative, very much tied to Britain, God Save the Queen, Advance Australia Fair, that kind of thing. But then there's what the writer calls the real song, which is Waltzing Matilda.
Ah, the unofficial anthem.
Exactly. And that song embodies this deep empathy for the poor and downtrodden, the underdog spirit born directly from that convict past.
And this divide becomes really clear through one person's actions.
Yes, Vicky. She's an indigenous tow truck driver. And she protests the government's refusal, at the time, to apologize to Aboriginal people for past wrongs.
Yeah.
Her protest, she cuts the ribbons off her foster father's Anzac medals.
Wow, that's powerful.
It is. And it starkly highlights the ongoing, often ignored war against the indigenous population, a conflict many white Australians had, perhaps conveniently, forgotten. It really underscores that Faulkner line, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The past is never dead. It's not even past.
But in contrast to all this corruption and historical conflict, the sources also really emphasize mateship.
Yes, that powerful concept of loyalty.
We see it in the story of Paul and Skink, these two friends from the Blue Mountains. Paul crashes his dad's prized '57 Chevy, and Skink gets badly injured.
Right, right.
But Skink insists Paul doesn't get help right away because Paul would go to jail. Skink endures hours of agony to protect his mate.
That kind of unwavering loyalty, it's so central to the Australian identity mythos, and it stands in such stark contrast to, say, the bent cops that Sheridan rails against in another story. It just shows you the complex moral landscape.
So, against this backdrop, the sandstone, the water, the fire, the corruption, the mateship, how does something like the Sydney Opera House even happen?
Exactly. That's why the source is called a miracle.
Yeah.
A miracle in a city shaped by the pragmatic, profit-driven legacy of the Rum Corps. And there's this fascinating detail, the love letter theory, about Utzon's design.
A love letter.
The idea that the design was actually a highly sophisticated, coded compliment aimed at another architect, Leslie Martin, who happened to be the most powerful juror on the selection committee.
No way.
Whether it's true or not, the theory itself is interesting. It suggests that even in this gritty, complex city, sheer artistry and vision can somehow emerge. It can transcend the difficult origins, the deals, the politics, and become this true beacon. It speaks to an underlying capacity for greatness, maybe, amid all the difficulties.
And I guess that brings us full circle, Sydney. This city of just stunning natural beauty, but tangled up with a raw, sometimes really brutal history.
Yeah, a place where trauma is often casually cloaked, as the writer puts it. But its impact is still there, isn't it? You see it in the architecture, in those unique cultural quirks like embracing the underdog, maybe even accepting a bit of reckless behavior.
And the writer's journey, it ends with him conquering his fear of the bridge, doesn't it? In a dream, at least.
It does. It suggests maybe a personal peace with the city's complexities, an embrace of all its layers, all its contradictions.
So it leaves you wondering, what does it really mean to know a place like Sydney?
Is it about accepting those contradictions? The beauty and the trauma, the mateship and the corruption the public face, and all those hidden histories.
Perhaps understanding those deep, often unseen forces that continue to shape a place. Maybe that profoundly changes how you experience it.
Yeah, maybe it allows for a deeper, more empathetic connection, not just to Sydney, but to the places you inhabit every day. Something to think about.